Let's talk about full body intelligence. And I want you guys to think back at the time that maybe you started switching up your diet. Because when I think back to my story, and I think back to when I was 17 years old, I was working at the Oakland Yard in Waterford, Michigan. And I remember we had unlimited access to the soda machine. And because of that, I was drinking, we called it pop, orange pop, Pepsi, Coca-Cola. I was drinking all of the sodas all day long because it was free. Or maybe I was supposed to be paying for it. I'm not sure. But doing that made me start feeling like this isn't good for my body. So I quit drinking soda shortly after that. So this is when I'm 17 years old. And I immediately switched to, we had these big bottles of Gatorade. And so I was like, all right, I'm done with the soda machine. I'm just going to snag these humongous bottles of Gatorade. And I was drinking tons of Gatorade. I was bringing them to school. I was even filling them with Mike's Hard Lemonade and then bringing them to school. If you guys ever did anything like that, if you were a little bit of a rebel like I was, after a little bit of doing that, I started getting sick of that fake juice. So by the time I'm 19, so that was 17. By the time I'm 19, I'm now playing hockey. I'm practicing every single day with games on the weekend, a semi-pro league. And I was working in the morning. I would get up at 4 a.m., work till 2 p.m., and then I would drive across town to the hockey rink, practice from like 3:30 to 4:30, or work out a little bit, 5. And then I would drive all the way back, and I would go to community college from 6 to 9 p.m. And after that, I would do some homework and I would go to bed, and I would do that over and over and over again. And fast food, the reason why I'm saying all that is because fast food was the only thing I had time to eat, with work in the morning, then hockey, then school, then sleep. And I remember one day I was driving to hockey and I just got done with work. I went to Burger King and I picked up 2 fish sandwiches, and I was eating the fish sandwich. And I remember just tasting that nasty mayonnaise stuff that was on the fish sandwich. And I remember looking at it because I was already like, this is the healthiest thing I can get at Burger King. As a 19-year-old, that's what I thought. We didn't really have internet like we have now where we can learn these things. It was just like what every one of our friends did is how we ate. So I looked at the fish sandwich. I remember just being disgusted by it, and I threw it out my truck window, and I went to hockey starving. And that was the end of fast food. And so over a course of years, I eliminated more and more and more things. Eventually it was like soy, gluten, cereal, find out that like oatmeal is not the best for you, microwaves aren't good for you. So it was like eliminating for like 15 years, just a little by little. But when I think back to, it must be Wednesday, Roz on, yes. Hi, Scott. When I think back to, because I get asked the question all the time, when did you start being open to reality in this way? When did you become interested in consciousness? I was going to school for psychology when I was 17 years old, and then eventually exercise science. So those are my 2 degrees. I don't think the education or has anything to do with it, because when I stopped drinking soda and then fast food, my physiology started changing, my thoughts started changing, my emotions started changing, and my radar to be able to tell what BS is and what truth is started to drastically shift. And yes, I was going from child to young man at the same time. So I was also fluctuating through the phases of life. But I really contribute awareness and expansion of consciousness to the lack of garbage I was putting into my gut. And I've got some studies I'm going to go over that explains the drastic importance of our gut intelligence and our microbiology of other organisms that are going on in the body, because these other organisms give us life. They give us emotions. They give us the ability to think. And if we're destroying them with fast food, with soda, with cereals that are soaked in glyphosate, we're not going to have the type of intelligence that we have as our greatest expression of self, and we won't even really know why. So I've got a paper here that explains exactly how many neurons are in the gut. Because guys, we don't just have brain power up here. This is the head brain. You guys might have heard of the gut brain. You may have also heard of the heart brain. And so these numbers constantly fluctuate, but depending on where you look, you're going to find that in our head brain, we have 86 billion to 100 billion neurons in our head brain. And when you go to school, that's what you learn, how we think. This is where we learn where our hormones are produced. This is where we learn where we determine what emotional state that we're in, how we choose the activities that we do. Do we turn left? Do we turn right? Do we say yes? Do we say no? We're taught that it's all happening up here. But if you actually look at grandma wisdom, just trust your gut, sonny. Right? Like if you actually look at the nuances of how we actually live our life, we break our heart. Like that breaks my heart. We actually feel pain here when we're going through difficult situations. And we actually know innately, intuitively, that there's more to us that's actually thinking, perceiving, and translating our life than our head. Scott says enteric nervous system is beyond the parasympathetic nervous system. Scott, elaborate on that. So the ENS is what he's talking about, is actually what I was going to bring up. That's my first. Let's look at. So remember, I said 86 billion to 100 billion neurons in the head. 600 million neurons. Do you guys see that? Just want to make sure I get it all on the screen. 600 million neurons. So remember, I said 86 billion to 100 billion in the head brain. Depending on what study you're looking at in the gut, we've got 600. So Scott just said enteric nervous system, right? So the enteric nervous system is essentially the nervous system in our gut. So this paper says 600 million. This one's saying 200 million. The ENS is unmatched in the peripheral nervous system. It has been estimated that the ENS contains 200 million. So we're going to just say, for the sake of this discussion, that we've got between 200 million to 600 million. I used to say 100 million. So we've got 200 million to 600 million neurons in the ENS. Now, what that means is that that's about a 20th of 1% to a 60th of 1% of our brain is living in our gut. If you essentially, how I got that figure is you just divide 200 million by 100 billion, and you see that it's 0.2 of 1%, right? So it's a 20th of 1% to, let's just break the average, or let's just say like what the average is. Like it's 0.5%, a 0.5% of our thinking ability, our emoting ability, our perceptual ability is happening in our gut, just compared on the amount of neurons that are available. Okay, just a simple like math equation. That's pretty significant. A 0.5% is extremely significant. Now, what helps out or what reduces? I have some studies. I don't know if I think I took them out, where they start looking at rats and they start seeing that if they don't have a microbiome that's flourishing and varied, they will get depression and anxiety. And so a lot of those disorders are a function of not having a varied microbiome. And the reason for that is, so this paper is called The Brain. Oh, let me give you the names of the other papers. So the first one I pulled up with the 600 million is called, this one's amazing, actually. Talks a little bit more about the ENS, but this one's called The Enteric Nervous System and its Emergent Role as a Therapeutic Target. So, quote, Science and Psychology as of 2020, and this paper, they're starting to record and recognize patterns that it has a role, and we can actually use therapies to target certain, quote, illnesses. But it doesn't really, our healthcare system doesn't really address the cause, right? So we can try and fix where it's broken, but we don't really ask the question of why it's broken. This one's just called The Enteric Nervous System, and it's published in February 2023 by Gary M. Maw. The first one is The Enteric Nervous System and its Emergent Role as a Therapeutic Target, Mark A. Fleming et al. In 2020. This next one, and I almost forgot about this one. This next one's called The Holobiont Mind, a bridge between 4E cognition and the microbiome. So 4E cognition, let me get this a little bit. 4E cognition is a type of cognition. The 4E's essentially means like your full spectrum self. The 4E's stand for embodied, embedded, acted, extended, when I like to call it expanded, but it's extended. And that essentially means that you're like, you guys have heard of people say like 5D. It's 5D. You're living in 5D or you're living in 3D. I mean, the 4E's really help explain that. Let me see if I can adjust the layout again. Holobionts mind, a bridge between 4E cognition and microbiome. Once again, the 4E's stand for embedded, enacted, extended, and embodied. So this is essentially saying that when we are healthy in our microbiome, we have an ability, and this is my language, to think in 5D. Without it, we don't have an ability to think in 5D. Now, this paper is one that I've read many times. And this one, so there was a word in the other paper, holobiont. If you guys have never heard of holobiont, it's something very interesting. Holobiont essentially means that we are made up of a collection of consciousnesses, that we are not just one entity. We are not just human. We are not just our name, Ra. We are not just one. We must first reject the already outdated idea that we as biological entities are unitary individuals. Okay, we must reject the outdated idea that we are a single unitary self. What constitutes us as biological organisms is actually not just our body mass in the sense of organs, muscles, bones, etc., but also the microorganisms living in symbiosis with our bodies. So this is saying that microorganisms actually make us who we are. And this paper talks about all the different ways that that is. In fact, our bodies contain, on average, 10 times more the number of human nucleated cells. So 10 times more bacteria than human cells. Get that? And this is a number I'm sure that changes as well. I usually just say there's more non-human organisms inside of us than we have human cells. But this is saying there's 10 times more non-human organisms in our body than cells. So to prove that two entities living together are a biological individual, one needs to prove that there is a shared functionality. Inferring that two entities are a unique individual from the fact that they share the same physical boundaries is insufficient. So what this means is that two individuals like me and a bacteria living at the same place does not sufficiently suggest that we are the same individual, that we're functioning as one, because we have things like parasites that aren't necessarily us, right? They're not really making up us as an individual. One of us is a host. The other one is sucking the life force out of us. And maybe there can be a mutual beneficial relationship, but we're two separate individuals. And so in order to prove that these bacteria are actually one, and that we're in that is that we're actually one? Yeah, one biological individual. That's what it is. So that we're actually one biological individual, we have to prove that there's a symbiotic relationship. We have to prove that there's shared functionality. And that's what the rest of this paper does. It talks about how the bacteria are responsible for a lot of things. So the vast majority of the symbiotic bacteria dwells in our gut. So this is all new science. It says that it's been a couple decades. It's been a paradigm shift. And here we go. Hoban et al. 2016 found that the microbiota is necessary for effective myelination of the prefrontal cortex. And this is the part of the brain that deals with emotions, memory, or cognition. Moreover, the bacteria seem to contribute to synaptic growth and plasticity, and through the influence on brain development, also the progress of our motor control. You guys, like, it's myelination of the part of the brain dealing with emotions, memory, and cognition. It's also influencing brain development and how we process motor control, all done by bacteria. It's not done by just like our normal body functions. Our body utilizes the gut bacteria to know how to even move. Our motor skills are dependent on gut bacteria. So when we look at our life, this is important when we start thinking about things that destroy our gut bacteria. If you actually look at what the word antibiotic means, anti means not, or destroyer of, bio, life. That's what an antibiotic is. And what does that mean? It's going in, we're taking this pill and it's destroying our bacteria, because the philosophy is that the bacteria is causing us a dis-ease. But that's not the case, guys. It's not the case. The bacteria is actually doing everything for us. And they may be out of balance because of you, your life choices, the stress you're under, the lack of sunlight, the lack of earthing, the lack of fresh air, the heavy breathing, the blue light constantly, the not sleeping enough, the arguing, the fighting, the wanting, lacking, striving. All of that is actually the reason why you have the issues. The bacteria are usually trying to protect you. So going after the bacteria is like going after the firemen. So it's like, oh, every time there's a fire, we see firemen. So let's kill the firemen. That's what we're doing with antibiotics. Some bacteria can even mediate pain perception. The gut bacteria, the gut microbiome shapes our emotional states. So once again, so consciousness without brain. So this paper is amazing. I highly recommend. I could spend the whole hour reading it, but I would rather you guys just Google this: the brain, gut, and consciousness microbiology of the mind. And the reason why I bring that up is because if we can start thinking about ourself as a collection of organisms, I hope you guys see where I'm going with this, then we can start seeing ourselves as a collection of organisms. That's the same exact sentence. We can see ourselves as a collection of organisms inside of us, which are cells. We can start seeing ourself as also a collection of a grander organism. Imagine these bacteria, imagine even our human cells. They all have individual lives. They eat, they excrete, they multiply, they live, they die, they get birthed. They all have their own life experience, and that's all to serve a function of us. And so back to the original question, I believe it's through the trillions of microorganisms that we get spiritual and quantum downloads from, says Scott. So that's where I'm going with this. Guys. A lot of the times our perception allows us to open up to new realities. So back to that D thinking, which is really E thinking. But back to the 5D thinking, us closing the door on the possibility of that ejects us from the possibility of that. Next comment says 5D can be accessed through the 4 E's. Fun. I will research that further. Thank you for being out there, hermano. You're so freaking interesting regarding human cells and other magic whole life living in the United States. So I'm just getting through the comments. Thank you for this lesson. The capacity of our imagination is also dependent on the balance of our bacteria. Exactly. If we can start thinking of ourselves as a collection of entities, we can start thinking about ourselves as a collection of entities. We are living an experience for ourselves. Yes, if you would like to perceive it that way, or are we also making up an aspect of a grander organism? Just think about the concept of prayer. Some of you guys may have heard this story, but I know this third generational exorcist. So he essentially helps spirits out of places like hospitals and apartment buildings where the spirit is trapped and it's maybe haunting the people there. And he looks at them, the way he explains it, he doesn't look at them as like a pest, views them as a lost soul, and he helps them to leave and to not disturb anybody else. And he has this very soft interaction, the way he explains it, at least. And he explained to me that if you think, so we're talking about a guy whose grandpa did this, his dad did this, and now he's doing this. And the way that he explained to me prayer was like, he said, think about prayer. It's your body that's praying up to a grander organism, and that grander organism is you. And so when you feel something like a pain, that is a prayer. And so when we pray, who are we praying to? We're praying to the grander unified organism of ourself, and it's going to feel that pain or that pressure. And just like we would reorganize reality to alleviate, support, help out the origin of that prayer. Reading more comments. Bacteria are all different personalities. We can allow ourselves to hop in and out of raw. Each bacteria or node of them at the helm of our body affects your physical capacity on any day. Can you give more information, sites, or articles that I can read, please? Yes, I gave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 already. So I'm not going to go back over it. Just watch the recording. Responsibility is something that we learn as we live. And if you look at that word ability, it's the ability to respond. And so opening up to these alternative perspectives of what we're doing here in life also comes with a response. And our ability to respond, our capacity to absorb responsibility for this is going to be reflected in how we absorb these new realities. So the amount of responsibility that we take on with this new information is going to allow our boundaries of what is possible to expand. As we start to see more, if we are not able to take responsibility, if we do not have an ability to respond to it, we will shut off and we will keep our boundaries limited. We will just view life as self. We won't even go down into self as a multi-organism body. It's just one self. So we don't go down and we also don't go up. We don't expand inward and we don't expand outward. If we expand inward, we take responsibility for our organisms interiorly. We are eating a healthier diet that is progressing. We are progressing through life, making sure everything is healthy within our own boundaries of self. And then we also realize that, like, I am an individual unit of a grander version of self. And because of that, we start progressing on that journey, because that changes things, doesn't it? Most all of us weren't raised that way with that level of responsibility. We have always just been responsible for ourselves, right? So like when somebody says something mean to us, we block them out, right? When a criminal that we label steals something, we throw them in jail and lock them away so they can't interact with any of us, not realizing that that would be like one of our cells internally blocking another cell from doing anything in our body. And so if we have the peoples of different countries within our body, the cells of different nations in our body at war with other nations, then the grand organism isn't going to survive. And The responsibility here, guys, with 5D thinking, 4E thinking, ascension, the responsibility, the thing that opens us up to that is for us to accept that we are a part of everything. From the what I know about religions, same concept, guys. Why is God called the Father? It's this parental figure because of the children of God are all one family, one unit. The universe, like even in science, it's the universe. It's one song, one vibration. Look at Kabbalah. It's like light that gets transformed into all these different aspects. Eastern philosophy, it's the same thing. It's like these different layers, different dimensions of reality, and eventually it trickles down to our experience. But we are having an experience so that we can be a part of the whole. And there's so many of us that are healing our broken self, and that's the training wheels. We learn to get over our wounds because Earth in general, like all of reality, has many traumas. And the purpose of our life is not to get over our trauma. It's to get over it so that we can use that skill to incorporate that into society. Melissa Photo saying, fully intentional living for the collective consciousness. You're so open and compassionate, gentle. Thank you for your brand of gentleness. So wholesome. Psychology, same thing. There's this theme called the collective unconscious. And it's this unconscious signal that permeates everything. And you can call that God as well. And that suggests that it's this non-physical source that we all tap into and we all a part of. And even when you go physical, guys, have you ever been in a room with somebody else? The air that they're breathing is the same air that you're breathing. And if you expand out far enough, the food that all of us are eating is a part of another life form that is all eating itself. That's the circle of life. The trees produce the fruit, the animal eats the fruit, something else eats the animal. All of that gets defecated back into what? The earth. And then what? The microorganisms eat the decaying flesh of the fruits and animals. And then what? The plants eat the microorganisms. And it all is eating everything. That's the closed system that we're in. And so how are we able to respond to that? Are we able to get over our traumas? And so the practices that we do on a day-to-day basis, whether it's yoga, whether it's running, whether it's meditating, whether it's fascial maneuvers, whether it's mindfulness, breath work, this is all to prepare ourselves for going out into the world and utilizing that same practice into our relationships. From the yoga lineage that I've studied, the foundation is 10% of your day is dedicated to your own alignment. So for 2.5 hours a day, you are aligning yourself through movement, through breath work, through chanting, through meditation. You're connecting to source for 2.5 hours. And then that prepares you for the 90% of the day where you're interacting with others with this balanced, aligned self. And I really like that thinking that we are agents. We are on a mission to spread this alignment. It doesn't have to come through like the missionaries that go knocking on doors and say, hey, will you come to our thing and be one of us? Everyone can be who they are as long as we're in alignment. When we start acting out of alignment, we are less powerful, less capable, and we're destroying the integrity of the whole. And so everything comes down to alignment. First, alignment in self. I started this talking about the gut microbiome, which is why we are so passionate about nourishing, detoxifying, repairing with our nutritional programs. And then also I align emotional, psychological, physical, mental, breathwork, chanting in my self-expansion app. Just check out raw_of_earth for any information on that. A lot of my pinned posts have to do with that. But guys, for those of you guys who are late, check out this paper. I'm just going to bring it up one more time. Brain, gut, and consciousness, microbiology of the mind. Animals, in fact, do not have sensations or any other kind of conscious experience. They are mere automata, which means automatic. And it is simply an illusion that when you come home and your dog jumps up and wags his tail, he is happy about your return. As I tell my students, if you can believe this, you can believe anything. So this is, I believe, talking about how other species can be conscious. So this is like basically saying like this is not true, because otherwise you would believe that your dogs don't have consciousness, don't have emotions. And so they're going over these bacteria definitely are conscious entities, just like your dog is a conscious entity. Because back early days of science, we didn't believe that. We just thought the animals are just like mindless, brainless, consciousless things. And that's not true, just like bacteria. And we've got all these people that are advocating for animals because we're like, animals have feelings too. Animals suffer. Well, so do bacteria. So like when we plow the earth and make room for our houses, we're destroying trillions of bacteria as well. Okay, guys, I'm going to leave you here. Check out this paper, The Brain, Gut, and Consciousness Microbiology of the Mind, and be unified in yourself so that you can be an aspect of the grand universe soul self, which is what we are all a part of. And that's really our duty in ascension. Take care, everybody.